Hi guys, this is Nadia from Ubali Crafts, and today I want to show you how to create this hammered wire wrap pendant. As always, there is a PDF available as well as a full kit with all the stones and wire included, so I'll pop a link in the description below and you can take a gander and see if there's anything you fancy. Don't forget to subscribe because I upload new material on a regular basis. If you fancy it as well, we've got an artist group on Facebook which is called Wire Wrap and Metal Smiths Worldwide. I'll also put a link below in the description. Alright, so let's get started. So to begin with, we need to create the frame. So we're taking our base wire and we're going to find the midpoint and fold it at an angle, 90-degree angle roughly, and then we're going to create the base shape, which will be the place where the stone will sit in. So I'm just gently curving it with my fingers to give it the initial shape, and you can always adjust it later with a pair of pliers. So I'm just forming it to fit the stone. And here's my teardrop. It's quite a squat teardrop, so it's not one of those long ones, but you can use it as well. Obviously you just have to adjust the design to suit the shape of your stone. But here I'm just using my fingers to get the initial shape. If you're more comfortable, you can obviously also use, you know, a round object to do this. It's up to you. So I'm just pushing it and shaping it, and it's quite important to have it symmetrical at this stage. So just try and get the frame to fit. So I'm putting my stone in to reference it. Now, when I first started the design, I made it a little bit too tight, so make sure that you have about 0.5 millimeter gap between the frame and the stone. So make it a little bit bigger than what I've made it here in comparison. So what I'm doing here is creating the wire for the bale. So I'm bending the top wire at an angle, 90 degrees, and just make sure that they are parallel and obviously also symmetrical on each side. So you can readjust if you've already bent the wire. You can adjust it. You can straighten it and then rebend it. Obviously don't do it too often, otherwise it'll break. All right, so the next step is to hammer the frame. So I made it quite a broad hammered section, and it's important you see me here holding my fingers over the two top wires. And the reason why I'm doing this is so that it doesn't distort. When you're hammering the wire like this, it distorts the shape. So just be careful you hold them closed, and then when you hammer, just hammer into the direction that you want the wire to expand to, like this. And this will grow the shape, if you will, and you hammer it and you flatten it, and it will flatten into the direction that you want the wire to grow. And as I said, make sure you hold the top closed and continue until you're happy with the shape. So I made it quite large, you can see here, and again the frame is a little bit too tight for the stones, so make sure that you have a little bit more space than I did. What we're going to do next is close off the bale section with some half round wire. So I am just anchoring the wire on one of the sides. Doesn't really matter which side at all, as long as you anchor it, and then I'm going to wrap the half round wire around the bale wires, if you will. So I'm just tucking it in, and then I'm going to twist it. So I'm shaping it and I'm starting with a wrap, and then all I'm doing here is I'm actually rotating the wire and the piece depending on how and which section I'm at. So now I'm just wrapping the wire itself, and just make sure that the half round wire obviously is always sitting flat against the wire. So I'm twisting and then just continue until you get to the top. So this is what it looks like, and what I'm going to do next is bend the bale forward a little bit, and just always make sure that you have the smooth side at the front. So where the angle goes with the bale, the smooth side must be on the front. But this is just so that we can create a loop and it doesn't sort of sit lopsided on the chain later on. So I'm just using my fingers here to create the actual bale, and then I'm bending the legs of the bale upward a little bit because they will obviously sit flat against the frame once I have created the full loop. You'll see what I mean just now. So I'm just using my tools here, and I mean, as I said earlier, you can use a round object if you're more comfortable. I just tend to do a lot by hand because it's quicker and you don't actually need the tools for many of the things. You can do it without. So that's what it looks like. So you see why I made a little bend in the beginning. So next we're going to get rid of the remaining half round wire, and then the next step is to create the shape at the back for the stone to sit in. So I am splitting the bale wires now, and I'm going to use these to create a navette or oval shape. I'm not really sure. I think it's called a navette. So I'm just shaping it with my thumb once again, and I'm going to bring it to point near the tip. Fold it inwards, other side as well. And the way the wire sits creates a little recess, which is great for the stone to sit in. So that's what it looks like. So next I'm going to attach these wires to the frame itself. So now you need to be careful, obviously, because the wire has been hammered. So it's a little bit thinner than we started off with. And if you wrap it too tightly, it will distort the hammered wire. So be gentle when you're attaching it. So I'm going to bend the wire over the frame. So just feed it through. And obviously, because it's quite thick wire, it's a bit harder to manipulate than your finer gauges. So just take your time. And the pair of pliers I'm using here isn't great. I should have something that's a little bit stronger. I just couldn't find my other pliers at this point. So just flatten it out, and just obviously make sure when you attach the other side, which we will be doing now, is that there's equal spacing in between the two of them to keep it as symmetrical as possible at all times. So I'm going to do the same on the other side. So I've attached both, and you can see here there's a little recess now where the stone is going to sit in. So I'm going to place it here, and it's a bit too tight to fit, as I said already earlier. So for the design I'm going to make it in any case, so you can use it obviously for anything else, but you want a little bit of a gap to attach wires to the frame, and that was a bit difficult here. So that's why I said to you to create yours with a little bit more of a gap than mine. So I'm using that wire that I've just attached to the frame to fold over the stone, and I'm kind of pressing it down a little bit to hold the stone in place. Just shaping on the side, and then the next step is to create a swirl. So I'm using my round nose pliers here, and what I'm doing here is I squeeze the end of the wires, and as I squeeze I also roll, and this creates a tapered sort of tip. I'm sure you can see that here. So as I'm doing it, I also roll in, and this gives you a really nice smooth curl with a beautifully tapered tip. So that's what it looks like, and obviously we're going to do the same on the other side just now. So I'm placing the stone inside, and that is what it looks like, and you can arrange it sort of halfway up the stone itself. Obviously you can do this whichever way you like. We're going to do the same on the other side. Right, so I've done the same on the other side, and as always, be sure it's very symmetrical. Take your time with it. The more time you take with that, the better. It'll get easier the more you do with them. So the next step is to hammer the swirl itself. So I try and not hammer the tip too much, and I tend to flare out the arc. And for that, I use the sort of ball of my chasing hammer, because it's got a smaller surface area, and there's less of a risk to actually hit areas you don't want to hit. Apologies for my fingers right over that. I was at a wrong angle, so there we go, that's a bit better. So what I'm doing here is I'm literally trying to just hit the outer edges. So you can see I've flared them out nicely now. So the next step is to put the stone in place, and we're going to be tying these swirls down. So I'm placing it over the stone, and I'm pressing down these hammered sections, like so. And we're going to be attaching these to the frame, and that is going to be the initial attachment, if you will. So that's it. So now I'm making sure that everything is nice and round. So what I'm doing here with my round nose pliers, I'm kind of putting a little bit of a curve into the swirl, just so that it's more form-fitting, if that makes sense, because it's a little bit, too straight to fit over the stone. So if you have a doming block, you can do that as well, but not necessary. So next, we're just taking a piece of 0.4 26 gauge wire, and we're just kind of lashing it to the frame. And you can start to see here why I said earlier, have a little bit more of a gap between the stone and the frame, because otherwise it would be a little bit too tight. So it's still okay with a thinner wire, but later on we're going to have a bit more thicker wire, so it would be a bit more difficult to attach. So I'm just lashing it twice around the swirls and sort of once or twice around the frame. And when you trim off the wires, make sure that when you're trimming them off, they sit towards the inside of the frame, because obviously any loose end will cause to snag on clothing or scratch the skin, and you really want to try and avoid that. So I'm just wrapping around, and this is just twice around the swirl itself and twice around the frame on each side, and that's it. We're going to do the same on the other side. So next we're going to create a detail, and I've taken a piece of wire. Again, this is your 1mm 18 gauge, and I'm going to fold it in half. And the first thing I'm doing is I am squidging, technical term that, I'm squidging the tip, and then I'm folding it apart again. This is just so that I get a really nice pointy tip, basically. And then I'm creating like a V shape, like so. And this is going to sit in between those two swirls, like that we've just created. And then the detail, sort of the bend, is going to be just underneath the swirls. So that's why it's very important that you create a symmetrical design to begin with. And you can, play around with this a little bit until you're satisfied. I think I made about 2 for this set until I was happy. It's never straight when I teach because the camera is in the way, so I can't really see what I'm doing. So after this one I made another one, and just spend a bit more time to actually create it. So and if you reference it back to the stone, it should come out quite nicely. So that's what it looks like, and you can just reference it back to the design itself. Just going through the motions here, showing you how, and just seat it against the sun. You can see that the curves need adjusting. And then what I'm doing here is I'm rounding off the tip again, just like we did with the swirl, so that it's more form-fitting. So we're going to now adjust this until I'm satisfied. Okay, so the next step is to create the smaller little heart detail that's going to sit on the inside of that larger detail. And again, I am finding the midpoint, and you kind of want this to fit right down to the bottom as much as possible. So you don't need the, what did I say, 7 centimeters or so. You can go shorter, but I just like to have a little bit of wire to work with. So I'm trimming it down to about 1.5 centimeters, which I don't really know how much that is in inches. And once again, I am thinning out the tip of the wires like so to get a tapered end. And remember, as I squeeze the wire, I also rotate my pliers like so, and this gives you the tapered end. And we're going to be doing the same on the other side. If you're not happy with the size of the swirl or the shape or anything like that, you can adjust it with pliers like so. So the next step is, again, I'm rounding it off a little bit more, making sure it all fits. And we're going to be bending the wire on the outside around the edges. And unfortunately, I broke the stone. So you can see here, they're quite fragile, so you have to be very careful. The labradorites are very fragile. They've got little fractures within the stone, so there must not be any pressure. They don't respond well to heat. Unfortunately, I broke it, which is a shame because it was a beautiful stone. So I'm just picking another one. And this one is a little bit smaller, so it wasn't too bad a thing, because obviously I said the stone was a little bit too big, or I made the frame too small. So this one was a little bit smaller, which was actually better, and it's still a beautiful stone. So I just roll with it. So the next step is place the wire once you're satisfied with the frame, and we are folding the outer edges of that wire around the swirls. And then those swirls, we're going to be hammering them flat. Okay, so in this instance, when you hammer, you need to be very, very careful and just do it very lightly, because you really do not want to distort. The harder you hit the wire, the more everything distorts. So in this instance, I will still get a very nice flare. It'll just take a little bit longer, but it's much more controlled, and the wire will expand just the same. So you can see me here, I'm literally just tapping the wire, and again still moving into the direction that I want the wire to expand to. And the thing is, with hammering it like that, it will also not bend your wire too much. So we're going to do the same on the other side. And obviously the small heart is a little bit more tricky. We're going to be doing the same thing, but I'm going to be hammering the outer edges of the arc as I did with the previous swirls. So you can see here they expanded quite nicely, and now what we're going to do is lash these two components together. So I'm just taking my weaving wire, and I'm doing about, I think it was 10 wraps, so around one edge. You want the wrap, the coil, to start where the bottom of the heart begins. I hope that makes sense. You'll see what I mean just now. So we've wrapped one side, and I'm going to move to the other side. So the weaving wire needs to be folded in half, basically. So one half goes on the left and the other half on the right. And I'm doing about, I think, 10 wraps or so on each side, just enough to reach the bottom of the heart. Right. So I'm just pushing down and try and be as neat as possible. It's always been my philosophy, because it's easier to be neat than to try and tidy something up later. So that's the way I've been doing my wrapping, which is also why I'm pretty slow with wrapping. But everybody has their own sort of, way of doing things, and I quite like to adjust as I go along. So the next step is to take that component, and we're going to be attaching it to the big component. It's a little bit fiddly because it's a bit small. So what we're doing is we're lashing it around the heart and the frame twice. And the first couple of wraps, as you can see here, are a little bit fiddly because they don't want to sit together. So you just have to hold them in place and wrap once or twice until it's nice and tight, like so. And then that's attached now, and then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So wrap around twice around the heart and the big frame so that they are lashed together. And this will already, position it to begin with, and it will also make it a little bit more stable as you're wrapping. So I've wrapped it around twice, and now I'm going to go around twice around, or 5 times around the main frame. Is it twice or 5 times? Can't remember what I did here. So that's twice. That's it, just twice. And then all we're doing here is lashing the small component to the big component with 2x5 wraps to begin with, like so. There's a little inset obviously on the left, so you can see what it looks like. And then once we've lashed it together, we are going to feed the weaving wire through the frame itself, like so. And pull that through. And then the frame will slot into place. If you feed the wire through, you can use that to pull the detail into place, like so. And now what we need to do is actually attach those details to the swirls on the frame. So we're going to go twice around the big frame and the frame on the pendant itself. Again, there's a little inset on the left here that will show you exactly how the weave is done. So once we've done that, we're just going to go around the swirl wire from the frame, then we move up to go around the small heart and the big frame twice, like so. And then we're going to continue right up to the top and do the other side as well. Right, so this is what it looks like so far. We're going to feed, and you can see here why I wanted you to leave a little bit more space between the stone and the frame, because the 1mm wire needs to fit through in between. And this is actually how I cracked the stone in the beginning, because I forced the wire. And as I said, you know, labradorites have got cleavages within the stone that just don't cope well with that kind of pressure, and that break easily. So I've attached it to the frame here, and I'm going to trim off that wire. You can use it again for another detail. I've just decided to trim them off because I'm going to add more detail at the top. So these are gone, and I'm going to use my, again, this is not the best pair of pliers. These are great with fine tips, but they're not very strong at the front. So for thicker wire like that, they're not the best to use. But this, I couldn't find my other ones, so that's what I'm doing here. So squeezing this shut, and this is what the detail looks like so far. So next I'm taking some 0.8 square wires, and I'm going to wrap it around the bale. So now you see me have only wrapped it once, but it's better if you wrap both wires twice. This gives you a little bit more stability. One wrap is just a little bit too loose and it doesn't hold anything in place. So when you put two in, there's a bit of structure that you know, the wires can hold on to basically. And I've only done one, but you must do two. If you want, you can do one just as well. And we are going to flatten these out. And I like to pull on the wires because that makes them nice and tight. Squeeze these together and then give it a good squeeze so that they flatten out nicely. And that's what it looks like. Right, so the next step is to create a detail. Now, this section is very organic, meaning that no two designs will look the same, even if you do it exactly the way I did it. So that's why it is quite open to interpretation. You can do it the way you want. I've just created swirls starting on the right. And the next step is I am taking the outermost wire and I'm creating a smaller swirl, folding it around and following the inner wire. And then I'm just adjusting it like so. That's what it looks like. Next, I'm going to take the left hand two wires and I'm going to go a little bit further down the bale, and again I'm creating a swirl at the bottom. So this time I'm going in an anti-clockwise motion. Oh, sorry, this is clockwise actually. I'm going clockwise with both wires at the same time. Again, if it's your design, you can create with single wires, you can add more wires, entirely up to you how you want to do this. It's just important that you've got enough space because we're going to be adding accent stones as details. So I'm going to take, I'm moving back to the right hand side, and I'm going to create a swirl for the first stone to sit in. So I'm rotating it anti-clockwise this time. We need to make sure that the swirl is big enough for the stone to sit, and I've used 4 and 5 millimeter stones for this design. You can use any size you want, obviously. Just bear in mind you need to adjust the sort of base swirl. The swirl should be bigger, just big enough to actually seat the stone in, but not too small, so that it lifts the stone up. So it needs to be quite big, so that the stone sits as flat as possible in the swirl, if that makes sense. So next I'm going to create the swirl. So nice and big to seat my stone in, and you can see me here using my pliers to actually adjust where the stone will sit. And again, you won't be able to recreate exactly what I'm doing, so just go and do your own sort of design. So that's the swirl. So you can see I'm taking my stone, or I'm trying to at least. It keeps popping out. So I'm seating it into, and you can see that the wire is just big enough to fit the stone, and then I'm going to fold the wire over the stone. Now obviously if this is a little bit too complex for you, you can add beads with drill holes rather than have loose gemstones like this to attach, because obviously this takes a little bit of practice. But it's a good way to actually practice the stone setting, as it's very popular and I love using it. But obviously it's not for everyone, so if you prefer, you can use beads rather than undrilled stones to seat. And my wire here is a little bit shorter, so I've given you more length, so you'll be able to attach the wire to the frame. So I'm going to go around with the other wire now, and I'm going to create a swirl. You can see here my wire was a little bit too short. I think I used 18 centimeters and I've given you 25, I think. So you'll have a bit more length than I had here. So I'm adjusting it and shaping it with the wires to fit the stone, like so. And I'm going to fold it around the stone itself. And then there's just enough wire for me. I was trying to set another stone, but there was just not enough wire left, so I've decided to attach it to the frame. And that's exactly why we need a bit of a gap in between the frame and the stone itself. So I would just go through the frame here, and one wrap is actually enough. And I've added another few stones on the other side here. I think the video for this has actually disappeared, so I went on straight to the bead area here. And I always add my beads after the loss because they're hard to polish. So I always add them on later, and again, this is a very organic design, so you can add beads wherever you like. And then tuck them away and polish as you see fit. And that's the whole design done. So I really hope you enjoyed this, and thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to visit me on my social media. I've got Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all under Bali Crafts. Visit my website for the kit and the PDF tutorial. And I would absolutely love it if you would join me in my artist group on Facebook, which is called Wire Wrap and Metalsmiths Worldwide. And that's it from me today. And thank you for watching, and see you soon.